From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, Debate 2, Return of the Republicans.
I dare Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama to watch these tapes, watch a fully formed fetus on the table, its heart beating, its legs kicking, while someone says we have to keep it alive to harvest its brain. This is about the character of our nation.
They're back. Moderated by CNN's Jake Tapper, the second Republican presidential debates of the 2016 cycle took place Wednesday at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. There were 2 debates, one at 6 p.m. Eastern, another at 8 p.m. Eastern. The earlier debate involved 4 candidates lower in the polls: Lindsey Graham, Bobby Jindal, George Pataki, and Rick Santorum. The primetime debate featured Jeb Bush, Ben Carson, Chris Christie, Ted Cruz, Carly Fiorina, Mike Huckabee, John Kasich, Rand Paul, Marco Rubio, Donald Trump, and Scott Walker. And beyond their shared words of affection for Ronald Reagan, the candidates quickly sought battle. Who won the primetime debate, Pat?
I think you'd have to say Carly Fiorina won it, John. She was prepared, she was programmed, she was articulate, she was crisp, she was tough. And after the debate was over, everybody said, or a lot of people said she'd won, and she has really won overwhelmingly the post-game debate, if you will, on all the TV shows, the talking shows. So people who think she won are going up, up, and up right now, long after the debate is over. But I will say this, Carly Fiorina is now being projected as, if you will, the anti-Trump in the Republican Party, someone who will do for the establishment, take down Trump, which the establishment is desperate to get done. So I don't think anybody was badly hurt in the debate. Some people did well. I think some people did very well. But there's no doubt about it. I think that Carly comes out number 1.
Hello.
Yeah, on debating points, she stood out. She really, I think, has introduced herself to the country. She's gone far beyond the Republican base. She played real fast and loose, though, with the facts around Planned Parenthood, and I think she really is overreaching in the criticism she's making of an organization that millions of women in this country have gotten services from, and to imply that they are selling and harvesting and selling baby parts. It doesn't bear out with the facts, and I think that's really offensive. But having said all that, she is a tough debater. She called down Donald Trump, and I think Trump basically has been taken down a peg or 2. He seems like there's a leveling. He's sort of one of the candidates, and I think Jeb Bush had his moments. I think he's still in the game, and I think Chris Christie actually came back. So I think the establishment is still alive and well against the insurgents, and I would count Fiorina with Trump as one of the insurgents.
When I say who won the primetime debate, if you define, depends on how you define win. If by win you mean who got the most airtime, Trump won with almost 20 minutes, followed by Bush with 16 minutes, and Fiorina with 13 minutes. You care to add to this discussion?
Yeah, I think how do you conceive of this, the victory, I think is the important point. If you look at the candidates, Jeb Bush had some moments of humor in there at the Secret Service, challenging Donald Trump. I think Carly Fiorina as well, that she had a very powerful line about, I think, women across America have understood what you meant. And I think his face visibly showed his concern there. I agree with Eleanor, he's been brought down a peg or 2. The question, though, will be, we have many more debates to go. I mean, if you think about 1980, George Bush obviously winning Iowa in the first caucuses, and of course Reagan became. So it's a long way. Things will happen. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
If you define winner as an improvement in relative standing, Fiorina once again won the most, followed by Rubio. But both started from relatively low levels. Bush moved up relative to his lackluster performance in the August debate.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. I think also that Carly Fiorina gained the most from this debate. However, I wonder, though, if she is not still somewhat damaged as far as winning the nomination, because one good shot that Trump got in was her record at Hewlett-Packard. And yeah, that was a hard time for high tech in general. I think she's got some good excuses, but it muddies the waters, and that
You're going to hear a lot
her.
more about that, Clarence.
Yeah.
They're going to be all over that.
Right.
The Republicans are, I'm sure Donald Trump is, and the Democrats certainly will, because that's what killed her in that, apparently, that
Yeah,
Senate debate.
So far,
But let me
she's
say
been.
this. Yeah, there's right. I think, John, let me say this about George W. Bush. I thought he did, I mean,
You
did the same thing.
This was 2015.
Jeb.
This is why you
Jeb,
need a young
look,
person
I
on the
thought
panel.
Jeb did a good job, and look, I like Trump. And he was being punched from every side in this debate. They're hitting him from here, and then they kept showing his exasperation when he's getting hit. But overall, it showed the very fact that there was a big guy and there was all these people piling on. And in that sense, he stood his own.
I agree. He had his moments. He
Yeah.
reached out to Carson on one
Sure.
side and to Jeb on the
Yeah,
other.
Jeb, he's
Plus
really
the fact
doing-
he's for going after the hedge fund guys, which I like and people of my ilk really
all
like.
love that, Eleanor.
But in terms of in terms of Fiorina, she's now going to get scrutiny. So far, she's been brilliant at turning really a leaden business career into spun gold. That and a losing Senate race is not much preparation to become president. So she's going to be examined, and Hewlett-Packard also didn't follow the sanctions against Iran. They sold lots of computer
Yeah.
equipment to Iran, and she's this big supporter now of tougher sanctions. So she's got a lot of inconsistencies she's going to have to address.
Issue 2, keeping us safe.
And your brother's administration gave us Barack Obama because it was such a disaster those last 3 months that Abraham Lincoln couldn't have been elected.
You know what? As it relates to my brother, there's one thing I know for sure. He kept us safe.
Okay, Rand Paul raises a Trump nuclear specter.
But I am worried. I'm very concerned about having him in charge of the nuclear weapons, because I think his response, his visceral response to attack people on their appearance, short, tall, fat, ugly. My goodness, that happened in junior high. Are we not way above that? And would we not all be worried to have someone like that in charge of the nuclear arsenal?
Mr. Trump.
I never attacked him on his look, and believe me, there's plenty of subject matter right there. That I can tell you.
And here's Carly Fiorina's defense plan.
What I would do immediately is begin rebuilding the Sixth Fleet. I would begin rebuilding the missile defense program in Poland. I would conduct regular, aggressive military exercises in the Baltic states.
Which of the GOP candidates is best placed to keep America safe? Oh.
Well, Jeb Bush, in declaring that his brother kept us safe, it never helps Jeb when he invokes his brother George. And he meant he kept us safe after the 9/11 attacks, kind of glossing over that 9/11 happened on his brother's watch. But yeah, I think Jeb Bush does have a substantial foreign policy view. His problem is that it's filled with people who served his father's administration and his brother's administration, and it's very hard for the public, I think, to accept that he's his own man. Rand Paul, I know Pat likes him, but he's probably a little too libertarian and dovish for the Republican electorate, and Carly Fiorina is totally crazy the way she
All right, John, let me
talks
say,
about inflating the defense budget.
there's a clear bifurcation in the Republican Party, and you can see it on the issue of would you tear up the deal with Iran as soon as you take office? Now, you got Walker will do that. Rubio will do that. I think Carly's going to call Bibi on the phone. And on the other side, you've got you've got Bush, who I would call a realist, and Trump, who says I'd take a hard look at it, and Rand, who said I'm not going to tear that up, and Kasich, who said I'm not going to tear that up. John, this is the division inside the party, which has been sort of mischaracterized as interventionist versus isolationist. I would say it's realist versus folks who want to go back into the Middle East.
I tend to think, actually, I'm obviously, people know I'm not a fan of the deal, but I actually suspect, Marco Rubio, if he was to become president, would not tear up the deal. Look, let's face it, if the deal is working, if Iran is complying, if there is verification, the deal will hold, because the alternatives very quickly, and anyone being honest would admit, they become complicated at best. Right. And so I think, you do see that. I think it's going to expand on the candidate side. And I would say on Fiorina, look, I mean, I know Ellen and I disagreed last week, but I think there is a point that some of the substance of what she was saying, it's very easy to say, well, rebuild the Sixth Fleet with the Mediterraneans. But yeah, the Russians have a lot of anti-ship missiles that could sink American carriers. So it needs to be a little bit more complex than calling up Bibi Netanyahu. And I think Republicans can own foreign policy, but they have to articulate.
And while she's rebuilding the Sixth Fleet, she's not going to talk to Putin because she's so tough. She doesn't have to talk to him. He'll just back off because he's so afraid. It's unrealistic. She's in the unrealistic camp.
I agree with you 100%. But the politics of the Republican Party are clearly still there, much more hawkish. They're moving the right way on trade, the right way on immigration, but they're still hawkish when it comes to intervention in the Middle East.
That's what's hurting Rand Paul, like it hurt Ron Paul back in previous races here, because there's a very strong sentiment in the Republican Party to buy more weapons, even though we already have more.
But there's a constituency. There's 14 guys against Rand. He's one guy, and he can get that constituency his father had.
He made a lot of sense on the debate stage. When
I thought he did too. I thought he had a good debate.
I agree.
But still a trap, well, it's not a trap, but it's a problem for them at a time like now when the Republican rank and file is feeling more hawkish than usual because of what's happening with ISIS.
But they don't have any solutions for anything, though. Well, it's just a lot of talk. Nobody wants to send, except for Lindsey Graham.
He and Putin could get on just like that.
Yeah, they're going to be pals. They're going to be pals there, as they said.
There's a dynamic in the debate that's quite interesting. And that is that the dynamic is the dynamic of something called Bravo, which is housewives who argue with each other.
Bravo?
And the conflict is
I thought
between...
it was a cable TV channel.
That is.
Talking about
Housewives of New Jersey?
The Bravo Factor. Is that it?
Housewives of New Jersey?
Yeah.
Step on a politically
because
correct landmine.
the dynamic is they argue with each other.
Are you saying Jake
And
Tapper was trying to do that?
that is what's going on here. Right. Tapper would quote one of the candidates against the prospective view of another and engage him in sprightly conversation.
These are
it's
called
created
the
by
McLaughlin
having,
Group.
in Bravo, the Real Housewives series, one housewife confronts others about something another housewife is saying about them, usually behind their back.
Right.
The hit reality series, Plenty of Fireworks, and CNN deliberately copied Bravo Real Housewives formula. From the first question, CNN employed the Bravo technique by prefacing each question with a statement another candidate had made about the candidate being questioned. Right. This unusual debate format was taken directly from Bravo.
Well, it's exactly right. Somebody described it as it's like the junior high. You go up and tell somebody, did you see what so-and-so said about you? And how do you respond to
But when you
that?
have that many people on the stage and you have voters trying to decide what's different, what are the differences, I think it effectively pitted them against each other. And Carly Fiorina did say a long campaign will reveal our character and our positions, and I think that's starting to happen.
Once around very fast, who exhibited was the most charismatic of the candidates that you saw? Just one name.
I would say no. I would say Rubio and Carly, if you're talking about charismatic.
Which of the two?
I would say Rubio is the most charismatic, although he really hasn't been able to build on that much.
I would say Rubio for that line he had about Spanish speaking and Univision and being able to deal with people.
Yeah, here again, how do you define charismatic? I think Rubio certainly has those qualities. Charismatic is a word that helps me to explain why Dr. Carson is still there, Ben Carson, who's a very likable guy, but I can't see him as president. I don't understand why people want him to be president. I also call it the Dr. Huxtable factor. He's just so likable that people think, well, he'd be a good president too.
Well, that's all very interesting, but the answer is Fiorina was the most charismatic. She struck an artful balance between passion and deliberation. Issue 3, language lessons.
This is a country where we speak English, not Spanish.
My grandfather instilled in me the belief that I was blessed to live in the one society in all of human history where even I, the son of a bartender and a maid, could aspire to have anything and be anything that I was willing to work hard to achieve. But he taught me that in Spanish, because it was the language he was most comfortable in. And he became a conservative even though he got his news in Spanish. And so I do give interviews in Spanish, and here's why. Because I believe that free enterprise and limited government is the best way to help people who are trying to achieve upward mobility. And if they get their news in Spanish, I want them to hear that directly from me, not from a translator at Univision.
You think he's right that you do gain ground if you can speak Spanish in today's America.
Well, certainly he's from the Cuban community down there in Miami, and that certainly would help you down there, John. There's no doubt about it. But in the overall issue, the broad issue, when Trump talks about, I mean, you don't have one country unless ultimately you got one language, and English is the language of the United States. An overwhelming majority of Americans believe that English, even when you come in speaking a different language, everybody should learn it, everybody should understand it, everybody should speak it so that we can become one nation and one people.
Okay, when you
Well,
listen
don't
to
you regret
Donald
not being
Trump.
able to speak Spanish? You've got those workers over there that come in from South America, cutting your grass and doing your lawns, and then you pay them this unsubstantial but acceptable fee by your standards.
I pay their boss.
Don't you want to communicate with them in Spanish?
Well, no, they should try to communicate with me.
But you can help them along.
They're very good folks. I will say that. I agree with that. They're Hispanic folks. If you run and see them working anywhere, they're hardworking and they're smiling.
Your earlier rhetoric is not going to help the Republican Party in the future of this country. If you listen to Donald Trump, listen to Marco Rubio, where is the future? It's not with Donald Trump saying, oh, we all need to speak English. I wish I spoke another language. I actually am the daughter of immigrants, and I don't even have their language. I should. I think people who speak Spanish in this country bring a lot of rich experiences for us all to learn from. And in a country that's going to be majority minority pretty soon, speaking Spanish is an asset. And if the Republican Party doesn't recognize that, they're missing a big bet here in terms of how to win an election in this country.
Well, that's the real question. That's the real issue. I don't know of anybody pushing for two languages. I don't know of anybody pushing people saying don't learn English. Right. Speak Spanish, speak German, speak something else. This is such an old issue in America. It's as old as America itself, and every generation goes through this, and yet we still do it. The fact is, people come here speaking their native tongue. They learn how to get along. The next generation learns English. They become assimilated more fully. That's the American way. And anything we do to slow down that process is bad, and that includes trying to eliminate bilingual education in those situations where it'll do some good.
Here is
there
how
are some places where it doesn't work well, and so don't do it there, but the places where it does work well, do it.
Here is how Trump spun it around with regard to Bush, who gives speeches in Spanish. Trump highlighted the fact that Jeb is weak on immigration, an issue that is of high importance to Trump's base. He made Bush look like an advocate of a permanently bilingual country in which assimilation never happens.
Let me get on here. I think the issue is with Donald Trump. Yes, he's trying to appeal to that anti-immigrant community, right? But at the same time, Marco Rubio is articulating, yes, people should learn English in America. We need that because we need people included.
They do.
Right, okay, but things like sanctuary cities and things, that there is an articulatable opportunity for Marco Rubio to play distance from Trump, but address that and secure the border.
Sanctuary cities
okay, but it's one issue, but securing the border is one thing. And saying,
look, speak American, anybody can.
Right,
You're doing
but
a great job,
we
pal.
must make sure we don't become like Europe, where there is a lot of tension between communities.
That's true.
Right.
We don't know how to do it right in Europe. We do know how to do it right. Let's keep on doing
what
what we're doing.
Clarence, does Univision really want one language in America? No, that is the problem.
Univision's
you got
not the only
huge
foreign
numbers of
language
radio,
channel.
TV stations,
Why are you
newspapers.
picking on Univision? There are
I'm
other foreign
talking
language
about
channels. There always have been.
We are developing into two languages. You're
we're
right.
not.
What
That
happened
thing's
before?
anything.
That doesn't mean
No,
it's
we're not.
happening now.
No, we're not.
Anybody-
We're not. There's
anybody-
new generations learning English, just like all
we
the
gotta
previous
move. We gotta
generations
move.
did.
Issue
Anybody who
4.
has two languages has an advantage. It's not mandatory.
Government shutdown strategy. Let's go.
But the one thing I'm not going to do going into 2016 is shut the government down and taint our ability to win. What you're saying and what Senator Cruz is saying, I am really sick of hearing.
Ted Cruz and Bobby Jindal Wright are wrong to call for a government shutdown strategy. Pat.
I think that what they want, John, is they want a Republican Party that stands up and fights and even goes right up to the edge of the cliff. That's what they want. And what our friend down in South Carolina, Mr. Graham, is saying, he doesn't want to do that. This is the battle inside the Republican Party on Capitol Hill, and it's coming up again.
And it didn't work out too well for the Republicans the last time it happened. And if they're stupid enough to take us over that brink and cost the country billions of dollars and disrupt people's lives, they're going to pay for it in the election.
They're not going to shut down the government. The Senate will shut it down by refusing to pass a continuing resolution.
That's a very convenient way. You think you're going to blame it on the Democrats? We know who's behind the push to shut down the government because they don't want to fund Planned Parenthood.
They're not
That's
shutting
what it's
down the
about.
government. They've never voted to shut down the government.
That's
Never.
a technicality, Pat. You know who
where the
you
money
know
is.
who
That's
got
it.
you know who got blamed.
I know who got blamed.
Right.
All right,
that's
let's
right.
go. Will the government shutdown this year hurt the Republican nominee in 2016?
It would certainly hurt the Republican nominee, but it makes sense for some Republican candidates, especially at Bobby Jindal, lower in the polls to say that because it appeals to a constituency of the Republican base. I would say what Republicans should do, and look at the Planned Parenthood videos, you can articulate that in the campaign and say, listen, this is why we should have some reform here. This is why we should have some reform on the tax code, entitlements, all these things. Make the ideas case to people in the electorate because the perception drives reality in a presidential election year, and you shut the government down, the perception will be very much in favor of the Democratic nominee.
If a shutdown caused a massive stock market sell-off and a downturn in consumer confidence going into the holiday sales season, the GOP nominee will pay the price. True or false?
Well, an economic downturn always hurts the incumbent.
Right.
It hurts everybody.
Right.
Are the Democrats equally obstinate over federal funding for Planned Parenthood? Just to conclude this.
Well, I think,
yeah.
look, the Democrats are in the tank for Planned Parenthood. They're going to be united on this issue. And Republicans are not going to vote to shut down the government. Harry Reid and his gang will do it.
That
That's our
was
sermon
once a
tank, too.
tank. That was once a tank that was filled with a lot of Republicans back in the day when there were moderate Republicans, thinking Republicans, and not everybody was pandering to the right.
Issue 5, flashes of humor.
Harley. I love riding Harleys.
Ever ready. It's very high energy, Donald.
Mr. Trump?
Humble.
That's a good one.
Who was the most entertaining, Pat?
Trump made the show, John.
The Trump-Bush show will go on for months.
I think Jeb Bush, the Secret Service line was great.
Well, Trump is the reason for the big ratings, and he paid off.
The answer is Trump. Issue 6, China's 12-mile message.
War is the sword of Damocles that still hands over mankind. We must learn the lessons of history and dedicate ourselves to peace.
China's President Xi Jinping says his nation wants global peace. And this week, China promised a crackdown on internet hackers who target America. But to some, China's promises ring hollow. After all, even as Mr. Jinping was proclaiming peace, his military was publicly parading its growing military reach. On display were weapons like the DF-21D, an anti-ship ballistic missile specifically designed to sink American aircraft carriers, and other missiles that can target U.S. bases on Guam, over 1,800 miles from China. That's not all. After training with Russian forces 2 weeks ago, 5 Chinese naval vessels transited through U.S. territorial waters in the Aleutian Islands. President Obama will have some tough questions when President Jinping arrives on a state visit next week. What message is China sending 1 week before President Xi's visit to Washington? I ask you, Eleanor.
I think he's firming up the president's pivot to Asia because China is emerging as a rival superpower on the world stage. Friendly cooperation, but it's getting more rivalrous, if you will, a little more aggressive. And I think China wants something out of this issue as well. This president is really cracking down on corruption, and there are some 15 Chinese billionaires who have fled the country with their billions, and he would like them extradited. So China comes to the table wanting something, the U.S. wants something, and then you've got the whole problem of each country spying on the other, and some pretty aggressive cyber hacking by the Chinese into the U.S., particularly into the personnel records at
John,
the government.
What the Chinese are saying to the United States is, look, if you want your 7th Fleet over there moving around in the East China Sea and the Taiwan Strait and the Yellow Sea and the South China Sea, you're going to find Chinese naval vessels moving around in all the waters which you've considered your own continental waters and which have been your private preserve ever since the British Navy.
Which water?
I would say, I wouldn't mean the American waters. I wouldn't be surprised to see them in the Gulf of Mexico,
You're missing
in
something.
the Caribbean.
What else?
and up in the Aleutians and up in the Bering Strait.
Here's the challenge I think that we face is that yes, the economic potential of a relationship with China, even now with their difficulties, is very important. We obviously want to avoid conflict as best we can. But the difficulty with what is happening at the moment with the undercutting of American power, the Aleutian Island training is interesting because they were training with the Russians. They went through the American Aleutian Islands. So that's a message. I think we should be sending a message of credibility to our allies in that part of the world. Places like the Philippines with PAG-ASA that the Chinese are building on. Vietnam is going to be arming their Coast Guard ships in face of the Chinese. Those islands allow the Chinese to dominate trade routes there, which they could really cause us economic damage if they decide to put missile platforms in those islands. So I would say one thing we should do, fly F-22 flights over those islands in one flight to send a message.
China poses no military threat to the U.S. They may in the future, but they're making their neighbors nervous, and so the U.S. has to kind of have their back.
Right. Well, the big threat they pose is not on the seas, it's in cyberspace.
Right.
Because that's where they're really doing damage.
On the seas as well.
But this is
well,
the
these are largely
paracels.
symbolic,
the paracels,
really.
what Tom mentioned, the paracels and the Spratlys in the South China Sea, they're turning these reefs into islets and islands and declaring it part, basically, of China and China's territorial waters. And there could be down the road real conflict if the Americans
meanwhile,
consider
the great thinkers on the Republican debate stage say that they shouldn't give the Chinese president a state dinner. They should take him to McDonald's. They shouldn't really deal with him. It is ludicrous. This is a great world power. You have to have a respectful dialogue.
I would say that silly comments are ludicrous, but I would say our policy is ludicrous at the moment, that they're coming through our territorial waters and we're allowing them to build it. Look, people don't take our word.
What are you going to do to stop them building on those reefs?
You put an F-22 over there, a flight F-22s. There's one, which is a symbolic gesture, but you can build an alliance against the
George W. Bush got one of his planes shot down going too close to Hainan Island.
Crashed into it. But what's going to happen if we do nothing? They're going to build up that empire. I mean, this is the
we got plenty of ships to send over there to sail them around. That's all we're talking about. These ships don't pose a threat.
Let Clarence.
No, these ships in the Bering Sea don't pose a direct threat. It's really rather mysterious why they're coming around, except to do a little muscle flexing. But they've got enough troubles back home. They can't afford to escalate their military budget right now.
You know, the U.S. military budget dwarfs China's military budget. Completely. And they are at the talks. They're going to talk about increasing military-to-military communications so that there are no sort of accidental altercations.
False prediction. Who will be the second Republican to drop from the race?
Virginia Governor Gilmore, I think.
Bobby Jindal would be my choice.
Pataki.
I'd say Pataki.
Lindsey Graham. Bye-bye.